Now live. Alrighty. All right, guys. I just wanted to come on and make a video. I wanted to do a live hangout with Angry Mgtow today, and I wanted to bounce back a few topics and a few ideas that I wanted to talk about with Angry Mgtow, and also been talking about with various people about where do we see the civilization going? Where do we see or if we see a possible collapse coming, maybe where do we see some possible areas of interest, areas of concern, where we might have problems and whatnot. I've been talking about the Matrix recently in my last couple videos, and I've been talking about how what we see is with the smartphones, what we see with the technology, as well as the politics and all these different facets going around us. I see that we can't necessarily keep up with all of this buildup because it's just not natural. It's not a natural thing that we see going on. And so I wanted to bring Angry Mgtow on to talk about that. So first of all, Angry Mgtow, thanks for coming on. And, feel free to jump in and start wherever, but I'd like to ask what your opinion is on, civilization, what we see going on today. Do we see, I guess the first question I should ask is, do you see a collapse coming? Personally, I believe so, just because what we see going on today is so unnatural, and it really can't sustain itself because there's just too many different facets controlling all this, and people are just too whacked out of their minds. What do you think about that? Feel free to say whatever, feel free to jump in.
It's really unfortunate that I'd have to say this. However, I see the likelihood of a collapse happening more likely than not. And I see that as a result of the current social structure. Just as you mentioned a moment ago, I agree entirely that it's completely unsustainable. I mean, a lot of people don't know where our money comes from, and they don't know where our money goes. They have no idea how taxation actually works, and they have no idea how the banks actually work. So at the end of the day, people are not really paying attention. They're just going along like sheep and waiting for the slaughter. Now, the only thing that could change our path would be a radical shift. The problem is that our belief system right now is so far to the left that I question if it's possible to achieve this without a collapse happening first. I think it was in Ireland where they had a huge collapse a few years ago, and everyone was broke, and they literally went and they put all the bankers in jail. They like arrested the Rothschilds. They also changed the system around. So, for example, people that were being taxed, charged interest at 110% on their homes, they ended up getting relief. There was a lot of changes done in the country, and after they did that, and they also got rid of their central bank. They went after the central bank, and they restructured the whole thing. And after they did that, the country began to change and flourish once again. Now, here's the thing. If you look at Venezuela right now, Venezuela is the perfect example of what happens when you allow socialism to completely run amok. In Venezuela, they don't have toilet tissue right now. They go for months at a time without toilet tissue. I was reading an article where a teacher makes an average of something like $80 a month in Venezuela, and right now they're not even able to afford food. And here's the irony about that. That's actually not such a bad thing, because before, a few months ago, they weren't even able to buy food. There was no food in the country. The government had set standards in the country that lowered the cost of food down to something like, let's say, 34 cents for a bag of cornstarch. And you would think, okay, so that helps the country. Well, if there's no competition, then it makes it very difficult to make profit. If it makes it very difficult to make profit, then there's very little reason to actually produce. And they literally killed the economy in the country. So people literally began starving in the country. There was very little food on the shelves, and there were people who were just, they're going hungry. And now they're getting some food. However, the food is coming in from other countries, and the food that is coming in from other countries, the only reason why that's happening is because the government has changed their policy where they previously regulated the cost of food. They're no longer regulating it, and now we're seeing massive inflation. So originally, let's say a bag of cornstarch was 34 cents. Now it's like $2.35. Yeah, I mean, it's a giant markup. And this is happening because of the way that the social structure went. They allowed socialism to destroy the country. And Venezuela, the craziest thing about Venezuela is that Venezuela is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, if not the most resource-rich country in the world. And I know that's saying a lot. They have an insane amount of resources, and they are starving to death. The government has no money because the system ran on socialism, and it ran on a structure where we're basically you're not going to charge anyone, you're not going to charge people much money for anything, and we're also not going to tax people much for anything. So we're not going to have any money, but everyone's going to eat. Yeah, that didn't work very long. And now the country is completely shit. And the government can't take care of the people anymore. They don't have any money. And this is where America is literally headed. In America, if you look at the current structure and you look at the polls, I was reading an article recently, and it was talking about what percentage of millennials see communism as a bad thing. And only something like less than half of all millennials, I believe, saw communism as a bad thing. It was some crazy numbers, and it was something like maybe like 20-something% even supported communism. When as far as supporting it, I mean, it was some crazy numbers, and this is where we're headed. I mean, and then when you mention socialism, virtually all millennials support socialism. It's ridiculous. Something like at least 70% of millennials support socialism, and it's half of all millennials, more than half of all millennials do not support capitalism. They see capitalism as a bad thing. I don't remember the name of this company. However, there's a company in the U.S. where there was this guy who he decided that he was going to pay everyone the exact same amount of money. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. I don't know if you've heard about that. Have you heard about that?
No, I don't think so.
There's a company where he decided to pay everyone the exact same amount of money. The company.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I know now. Yeah,
okay.
Credit card. I think it was a credit card company or some guy that had this company. I know which one you're talking about, though. Yeah.
Something like that. And he decided to pay. He's a young guy. I think he's a millennial too. And he decided to pay everyone the same amount of money. And he pretty much thinks that this would be the great idea. So if you're a secretary, you'd be making $75,000 a year. If you're a computer programmer, you'd be making $75,000 a year. Even as a CEO, he's now going to make $75,000 a year. And by the way, after he made the decision to do this, he went ahead and he ended up having to rent out his house just to make ends meet. And it's the most pathetic thing in the world. Now,
you know what that's a prime example of is equality and the notion of equality. And it's this notion and this belief system that everybody has to be equal to everybody, and that if we all just are the same, everybody will be happy. And it's just a ridiculous, stupid notion, because the problem with that is that you have people that are really high IQ, really smart people, and then you have the people that are not so smart. Well, what happens is that most of the people in society that are the strivers, the achievers, the ones that go out and take a bunch of risk, more than likely, most of the time, but not always, they have high IQ. So what happens when you put people like that are going to be the people that build skyscrapers, are going to be the people that build mini malls, or doctors, lawyers, whatever, high achieving jobs? What happens when you lump them into a sum with all these other people that are not of the same? And that's pretty much what we see with the school system today. And you mentioned socialism, and socialism is I think in a lot of ways America already is under socialism, especially with this recent last president that we had, Mr. You-know-who, Barack Obama. And, he really implemented the country, and he laid the foundation for socialism to come about. because so much of how we see things going about today is very much in a socialist type of way. We see this with the ideologies that have been taking root and rampant in Western culture and feminism, Black Lives Matter, equality, LGBTQ agenda, all this crap. And it's doing nothing more than it's a form of psychological warfare. And it's just interesting that you mentioned that, because our school system today is already based in that kind of socialist system where you have kids that are high achievers, you have kids that might have a little bit higher IQ, and that maybe the reason why they're not doing so well in school is for the fact that the material is boring and the material is not stimulating their true possibility of what they could achieve. And so you can see it perfectly, especially today. And what ends up happening is that they go off to college. More than likely, they'll probably major in some useless degree, depending upon their background and whatnot, and all these other factors. But you go into the workforce where it's even more equality being pushed upon people, and everybody should, like you said, this guy that was this CEO of this company, he was trying to lower and get everybody on a equal paying scale, and we see where that could lead up in a small scale. So you're absolutely right about that. I think we're very much already in a socialist, or in the foundations of the socialist country that we live in, especially here in America.
Well, answering you, just to finish answering that question, though. I mean, the reason I brought that up for a reason. So I brought up Venezuela and how that socialist economy collapsed, and I brought up this socialist structure that this guy is presenting. And what I'm trying to say about all of this is that when you look at just how many people in the United States, how many millennials, the millennials are literally the future of the country. And when I say the future of the country, I'm not talking about in 20 years. I'm talking about in 5 or 6 years. Okay? I'm about 30. I'm 33, and the oldest millennial is 35. And in 5 years, the oldest millennials will be 40, and I'll be pushing 40. I'll be really close to 40, and even the 20-somethings right now, they'll be in their 30s. So at this point, it's real. We will be the generation that has to step up. In 10 years, it's even worse. And the issue that we're presented with at this point is that so many young people are so supportive of communism and socialism that ultimately, I think it's very difficult for us to actually change the tide of things right now. We have Donald Trump running for president. We have Hillary Clinton running for president. And Hillary Clinton is a fucking crook. The thing is that even if Donald Trump were to win, even if Donald Trump were to do everything he says he's actually going to do, one thing is Donald Trump there's still issues with his message. He's not going far enough in some ways, and in other ways, I don't trust some of the things he wants to do either. And I question if the agenda of things, I question if there's enough people that'll stand up and say, no, reject socialism, reject communism, reject the way things are. I think that even under Donald Trump, you'll still have a lot of people fighting for liberalism, fighting for socialism, and fighting for communism, because that's the way that they've been programmed. That's the way they've been indoctrinated. And it's just, like I said, it's just so difficult right now to see such a radical change, occurring people. Now, starvation, for example, starvation, hunger, suffering, that can change attitudes very quickly. So can fear. Fear can change attitudes pretty quickly as well. The thing is, though, when you look at hate groups like Black Lives Matter and these other feminism and all these other radical groups, we can have a bomb coming at us, and these people would still be chanting, would still be sticking up for the enemy.
Radical. Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's. You're right on point with that. I think we've seen irreversible damage that has taken place due to feminism, due to these ideologies that have been implemented in the society, and that's what it's designed to do. That's its purpose, is to confuse the population and wage psychological warfare against the population, and that's exactly what it's done perfectly, pretty much, I would say. I think you brought up a point that I was going to mention, which is this whole mess of the election. And I think what's going to happen is that basically we're going to have, like, even if Donald Trump gets in, then we're going to have Hillary Clinton's people, throwing a revolt and getting upset. If Hillary Clinton's people gets in, and if she gets in, we're going to have the Donald Trump people throwing a fit and having issues, which is understandable because the woman's crooked as hell, and we see an open, lie to the people of the country. I think either way, we're going to see some pretty crazy stuff. And I think the biggest thing that people have to understand is that politics and all these notions of politics, and that, this whole right versus left, Republican versus Democrat bullcrap is just an orchestrated show. The person's already been decided a long time ago. They put these people up for a reason. They put them up to serve a purpose, and that's their purpose, is to run. We don't know the details of how embedded they are. What really disturbs me is not the fact that there are people who support a candidate that is for liberty and for freedom. What disturbs me is the fact that people are not willing to look at every side. They're not willing to look at every scenario, at every angle, saying, well, what if the person's lying? Everybody can lie. That's what politicians do. And if you mention that, then they just kind of brush you off. And it kind of shows this Stockholm syndrome that has taken effect. And I mean, anybody with 2 bits of common sense could realize that if you're so rich and powerful in any facet of life, you can't just not take advantage of that, because even if people were to go after, the good side, or the lesser of 2 evils, which is just evil regardless, they think that they're going to find a way out of it. And I don't think that's going to be the case. And so we find ourselves in this precedent right now with the election is like 2 weeks away, I think. And so we're really working our way up, all this build up, all this constant, fear and anxiety and worry and whatnot about where we see our future going. I don't think the future is, I don't think the way things are decided have changed. I think it's just the way that it's always been spun differently to get people to buy into the whole Hegelian dialectic. But what my question to you is, and I think I don't know if you were going to finish a point or not before I cut you off there, but basically, we have one facet of this, which is the politics, and we have the other facet of this, which is the people that are trying to go against the mainstream news media. They're trying to stand up for what's right. I think what we might see is a slow burn. I was recently on Traversable's Hangout, and James Denton was there, and he said a good point that I never would have thought to bring up, which is the boiling frog analogy, which basically is, if you want to boil a frog, or is an experiment, you do it slowly, because if you do it too hot, the thing will jump out of the pot. Same thing applies to the population. If you constantly are, I should say, if you slowly seduce and lull people into the different forms and more tighten down the screws of slavery, then they won't even notice it. And that's kind of what I see going on. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, that's an excellent point that you made. If you want to boil a frog, boil it slowly. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that happening in society, although I will say that the way that things have changed, it's pretty damn rapid. And it's like so much is happening around us right now. Putin recently said to America that the election was a distraction. He recently said that as a comment. And he suggested that there are things happening around us that we are not taking notice of. And I agree with him entirely. I mean, there are so many things happening right now that we're not taking notice of. So in terms of, taking over slowly, it's happening right now. It seems like they're just doing almost whatever they please. They slowly was over the last several decades. Right now, it's like they're just getting to the finish line. They're almost at the finish line. They've almost crossed they've almost crossed the home plate, and you know they see it, and they're running towards it right now. They just don't give a damn. And I honestly think that it's happening really rapid right now. It's not going slow. It's going really fast, and I just don't see things getting any better. I don't. Like I said, I don't see a radical shift happening. But you said it. You said it perfectly. It's like choosing the lesser of evils. You know, they're still evil at the end of the day. And I think that the only thing that could save us at this point would literally be a collapse of some point, ironically, not a major catastrophic collapse to the point where we can recover and we end up in the state as of the same state as Venezuela.
Either that or some kind. I'd say either that or some kind of divine intervention.
And yeah, divine intervention. And you know, I am a firm believer in God, but you know, how do I put this? Why should God save us? Like honestly, like you know, why? After all the shit we've done and we're still doing, come on. You know,
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, it's like if, yeah, that's the elephant in the room, I guess, because, it always even talks about it in the Bible. It's like America will become under judgment for what it's done or whatnot, or something along those lines. But whatever people want to believe about religion or whatnot, that's their own personal issue. But nonetheless, we've done some horrific things, and we've all been ignorant at one point or another for a whole lifetime, whatever the case may be for you. But I mean, basically, we're going to see some pretty rough times, I think, coming up. And, I guess people can take it one of two ways. Either you can be really scared and worried about it, or you can just realize what's coming and I wouldn't say go with the flow, but learn how to work with it, because you basically have two kinds of people, in my opinion: the ones that are unplugged from the matrix and realize what's going on, the ones that are not. And each one of those two people are going to have different sides and views and opinions about where they see things going. But I'm battling down the hatches because I see a storm coming, and I don't care what people want to believe, and if they want to sing Kumbaya or not. I'm smart enough to realize that this is not going to end well, regardless of whatever people want to believe it's going to be. If Trump gets in, then of course, that's great. He stands for it. But I'm not sold on politicians. I know how these people are. And if you're still believing in politics, I think you're just a child. That's just my view on it, because it's all bullshit.
Here's the thing, dude. I realized this recently, and I like the fact that you brought up the whole notion of childish behavior and when you believe in politics. I realized something recently about adults, about being an adult. It took me a long time to really get to this point. I remember when I was talking to a therapist a few years ago, I said to her, I don't feel like an adult. And I was around 28, 29 at the time. And I said to her, I don't feel like an adult. And she said to me, many people don't, right? She said, many adults don't. And I finally understand something now about being an adult. For example, we look at the people around us and we see older people. You see an older person, someone who's been doing a job longer than you, or simply been on earth longer than you, and you think that with age comes wisdom. And it's a lie. I have an aunt, and my aunt is a complete idiot. And I said to her, since the time I've known you, you haven't really changed. You're still the same type of person you were 20 something years ago, 30 years ago. And she said to me, well, you get older, but your mind doesn't really change. You're still the same person. And she's in her 60s. And that's what let me realize that even though you get older, even though we have people who are older than us, like the baby boomers, they're older than us, but they're not mentally older than us, many of us. They're still incredibly childish. And you see this you see this a lot of the time when you see very old couples and they're still behaving the way that teenagers behaved. You realize that many of them, they grew up in a different time and they never really matured beyond that point. So it's important that we not, look at the baby boomers as a generation that is smarter than us, because they're not. And they're not. Once you're an adult, you're really an adult and you have to carve your own way out in life. What they've done is they've mentally stunted the growth of millennials. So millennials have very little, they're not very resilient, and they're not able to deal with situations the way they should be able to. They need a safe space for everything. And that's a part of the agenda, to break down the structures so no one will stand against the elites. And here's the thing. They're going to offer the millennials security in the place of freedom. And I forget who said this. I believe it was a president or someone said this, that anyone who trades freedom for security deserves neither. And this is what the millennials are doing right now. The baby boomers have sold us out long ago, and the millennials are just going to seal the deal. They will trade everything for security. When I say security, that's how feminism works. That's how feminism got women. It went into the households and it said to women, we're going to give you money, we're going to give you resources, hell, we'll even give you a house, but there can't be a man in the house, okay? And they took away the freedom of women being able to choose to be housewives. They took away that freedom and they gave them security, saying that we will give you privileges, we will give you the right to work. The right to work. Women always had the so-called right to work, but they didn't have to. They had the freedom to literally be free, to stay home, to have a family. And a lot of women who stayed home, they were able to make money on the side by selling Tupperware, by starting at-home businesses, by doing things that they truly wanted to do. Women in the 50s and the 60s, even before then, they were truly able to find their passions. They could find their passions because they had the time to do so. Now in the workplace, women want to feel important, but they don't actually want to be at work. And this is how the agenda has changed us. So women through the 60s and the 2000s, women have now traded security, they've traded freedom for security. And it's that ultimate choice that is going to lead us to complete destruction and annihilation. And like I said, I think that if we had a collapse along the lines of the Great Depression, people say the Great Depression was terrible, and I'm not saying it was good. The Great Depression was a hard time. However, I think that we could survive that. I think we could survive a collapse, along the lines of the Great Depression. That would be so bad and the reason why I say that would not be so bad is because if we have another collapse, based on what the baby boomers have done with our finances, based on how much money we owe, based on the fact that our money is literally just IOUs. And I'll tell you, there's no fucking money in the Federal Reserve. There's nothing there. There's nothing in the Federal Reserve. There's no gold.
It's about as federal as Federal Express.
Dude, I watched the video that literally said it's about as Federal Express. Okay? Yeah. The Federal Reserve is owned by the Rothschilds. It's owned by the elites, and at the end of the day, just like Venezuela collapsed with a central bank, America will collapse as well, because those are IOUs. And when people go looking in the safe, where's all the money from the Federal Reserve? That reserve will vanish, and that's what's going to end up happening. Like I said, if that happens, it will be way worse than the Great Depression. Way, way, way worse than the Great Depression. I think that something along the lines of the Great Depression could kind of reset things a little bit, because it would show women, listen, you are not as great as you thought you were. You are not as strong as you thought you were. And hold on a moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to add on what he was saying, basically, I think that, we have two possible outcomes here. I think what we have is basically we could have a slow burn, which things slowly lead up to an event where everything slowly starts to culminate to a point where people they just don't realize what's going on. I mean, just look at virtual reality. We see virtual reality really taking off now, and people just want to be distracted. As long as you give them their pacifier, they'll be fine. They won't raise too much trouble. And so I think I see two possible options in all of this. I see the fact of a slow burn, a slow progression lead up to this, which makes more sense because using that frog, the frog in the boiling pot analogy, you do it slowly, won't recognize what's happening. And I think that's very much of a good thermometer of what we might see. Slowly see things start to happen, because you don't want to spook the herd, because if you spook the herd, then everybody will catch on, and you want to do this covertly, because then you want to have as much control over what's going on as possible. So, I mean, I think those are two factors. The other factor is everything could just completely tank real quick, and, then we'll look like Venezuela. And so there's many different, it's really hard to put the finger on what might happen. It's all up in the air at this point. Really, nobody really knows what's going to happen. I just tell my subscribers, and I tell many other guys that, we're all in on the same, because I think we're generally all in the same position. We really don't know what's going to happen, but we know that it's going to be a rough ride through and through, no matter what happens with this election or with politics or all this other stuff. Again, I say that politics is just an artificially created construct. It's fake. It's all there for bull crap. It's BS. And as long as people still keep buying in to that notion of politics, of government, we're never going to get anywhere past this. This is going to take a complete redo of everything, period, I think. And, I guess the only way to bring that about would be a collapse or a world war, which is also on the table for geopolitics right now, and a lot of big concern, and all these different facets, all these different, things that we see going on. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to put our finger on what exactly we might see, where it might come. We don't know. I think it's going to, if it does come, I wouldn't be surprised if things coming in on all facets, economic, social, there's just so many different ways that this could all come about. I think that it would make sense to do the three-prong attack, where we have all the different facets happening all at once. So economic, geopolitical warfare, psychological warfare, civil unrest, all this these different facets all coming together at once as a sting, an attack. It would make sense. So it's hard to tell. It definitely is hard to tell. And I just tell guys, get prepared, get yourself some food, get yourself some water. That's just about as best you can do. You can't really prepare for everything, and you don't know where things are going to be coming about most of the time. So, Angry Mgtow, are you back with us? Okay,
Yeah,
he's not back. Oh, okay.
I am here.
Okay, cool, yeah. But I don't know. I think it's just all up in the air at this point. We really can't tell too much of a difference of where things are going. I think it's just a matter of, hold on tight, and we'll see where things go. I wanted to talk about one other thing as well while we're still. I think we got about let's say about 30 minutes left, 35 minutes left, and that is, where do you see the people that aren't awake to this information? I always wonder this question. What are the people that are just asleep and ignorant and don't want to listen and plug their ears? I mean, what's going to happen to these people? I mean, I guess it's just sheep led to the slaughter. They'll go and do whatever they're told to do if it means that their survival. So, I mean, one example of this I'd see is that if you have civil unrest, you have somebody like the UN come in, offer free food, but they control what happens. And if you want to get that free food, you got to do what they say. And then you got everybody so quickly, because people are so passive now. It's just disgusts me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you a story. A few years ago, there was a shortage of gas in New York, and there were cars all over the place. There was like literally no gas anywhere. The military was in New York. I don't know if you heard about that. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, this happened a few years ago in New York. There was literally no gas in the entire city. And I got stuck down there. I had to go down there to take care of some business, and I got stuck down there. And it was literally hell just trying to get around. You could, if you didn't have gas, you couldn't move your car, and it was miserable. It was awfully miserable. And even though the military was bringing in gas, it was just impossible to get any. At least that's how it felt. And it took me literally about 2 to 3 days to finally get some gas. That's not saying that things went back to normal. No, I was after waiting like hours on a line one day, like somewhere, I was able to get some gas, and that was like out of like so many attempts. But that was it. Just gave me the perfect example of what it would be like in such a situation. I mean, back when I was homeless, there were times when I literally had to wait on a food line. A few years ago, I literally had to wait on a food line sometimes for it could be 40, 45 minutes. It could be an hour and a half, 2 hours just to get two pieces of chicken, two pieces of chicken and a bottle of water. And and you do this each and every single day. And this is your life. And I lived like that for almost 1 year.
I mean, that's a basic definition of socialism or communism, waiting in line for the rest of your life, because you take a look at it, you're going to have a messed up economy. You're going to have workers that are incompetent, who just doing it to get by. Maybe, I don't know. I would imagine that people would work their ass off because they wouldn't want to get fired because they have a good paying job. But nonetheless, this is, for argument's sake, say that everybody's waiting in line because of a bad economy and all these different issues that could cause problems and whatnot. That's pretty much what it is that you just wait in line. You hope that you can get your piece of the pie because things are so bad. It's like a Great Depression.
I will say this. When shit hits the fan, we will end up with things along those lines where they will literally be food lines. The thing is, the irony about that is, what will happen to these people? Many people will starve. Let's make that very clear. Many people will starve, and a greater number of people will die from disease and illness. Considering that so many people are unhealthy and sick, there's a lot of people in America who are alive today just because of medication. I mean, myself, I have to take tons of meds. There are people who take many more meds than I do. And when the economy tanks and people can't afford medicine anymore, and we have socialist healthcare, if even, and people can't get access to medication, what are they going to do? How are they going to live? It's people are going to begin dying off of disease, food shortages. People are going to starve. There's going to be an insane spike in the number of suicides, and there's going to be a lot of people who just go with the flow of it, like the sheep. Like literally, I'll put it this way: you can build a slaughter factory and line all of these people up. Just tell them, get in a line. And all the people, they'll just line up and they will march into the slaughterhouse. There's going to be a lot of people like that. I predict that a lot of people, however, will try to get out of the U.S. There'll be a percentage of people that leave the United States and successfully get out, going somewhere else. How many? I don't know, but it'll be maybe it could be anywhere from 5% to 15%. I don't see the majority of the population being so lucky because
I think that yeah. I mean, if America is so severely hit by such a terrible epidemic, then there is no escaping that because America is such a center hub for business that affects many different places around the world. So regardless of where you're going to go, you're going to be affected by the collapse regardless. And if such a big country like America tanks, everybody's going to be affected by it. I mean,
here's what's going to end up happening. America tanks. Initially, what these other countries are going to do, like as quickly as possible, is they're going to try to disengage themselves or separate themselves as much from America as possible to isolate it, to push back as much of the collapse from affecting them as they can. One thing, the first thing that's going to go is the U.S. currency. So other countries are going to begin devaluing the U.S. currency greatly. Like I mentioned, the U.S. currency is nothing more than an IOU. It's backed by goodwill. Back in the old days, I used to have some of those dollars, old dollars that said, like, you know, this is equivalent to this much silver. They don't have those anymore. The money is now backed by the United States. It's not backed by fucking anything, dude. So at the end of the day, there's not going to be, you're not going to be able to exchange that for gold or anything of value. So your money is literally going to be worth nothing. So trying to get to another country is going to be hard enough. There will be some people who, like I said, who will pull it off, and they'll be able to do it because of family, for whatever reasons. I think the people who will fare better are people who are going to be in countries like Indonesia, and countries that are less developed than we are, because their economies they still rely on systems of bartering. So, for example, they have better. They ironically will have better access to things like water and food and things like that, because their lives are not dependent on transportation of goods. They actually have farms. They actually make their own food. They actually can make their own clothing. So these type of countries will survive. Even in some of these countries, they operate on, they have, electric power is generated locally, and it doesn't literally travel hundreds of miles. So they'll have a chance. But us here in the U.S., it will be a collapse, and many will die. Many will go like sheep. There'll also be a lot of violence and unrest. There will be lots of killing, lots of looting. There will be. It's funny that women say there's a rape epidemic right now, because rape is actually at an all-time low in the recent decades. Like, it's lower than it's ever been, evidently, in the United States. But it's interesting because the bastards of single mothers, those will be the guys that will be on the streets, and they won't give a damn. They will be doing just about anything. And a lot of I will say that this will happen as well. A lot of the so-called white knights who stood up for women, and they stood up for women, and they did all these things and all this bullshit. And then when everything collapses, they notice that the women won't even give them the time of day, and they're dying, and the woman is there jumping on some big fat dude with some thug or some killer or the worst type of guys. It's going to be quite funny. A lot of these guys are going to become what we call dark knights. For many of them, it'll be too late, but for others, they're going to go on a rampage. And when you're hungry, you'll do things. I'm talking about killing, stealing. It'll be a burn. It will be a really bad burn. And I mean, if you think Black Lives Matter is bad, amplify that by 100. And I think that's what we're looking at. I'm talking about a nationwide teardown. I'm talking about violence, killings everywhere, every day, around the clock. I'm talking about not being able to go outside. I'm talking about a police force that's going to collapse. That's another thing. Who's going to pay these people? Who's going to pay the police officers when everything goes to hell? They're going to try to militarize, and then if everything starts to go to hell, it's going to literally get to the point where the police will be replaced by the military, and eventually that won't be enough, because the military won't even be able to function anymore if things collapse severely. And I'm quite confident of that, because I was looking at a budget recently that predicted what our military spending would be in the future, and it had severely plummeted over the next 10 years, which suggests that we are going to run out of money. And when we do run out of money, cops, military, all that, these are going to be among the very first things to go. Fuck education, that's always being cut. But we're talking military spending is going to collapse by the wayside. And when
it's interesting. You mentioned something earlier about how other countries that are going to try to separate themselves as much as possible. in the event of a collapse or possible pre-collapse. Of course, they're going to make the steps ahead of time. Well, recently, what came out in the news, this is let's see here. It says Philippine. It says here, I think the Philippine Prime Minister says that he's separated from the U.S. as he goes up to China. And the article basically talks about how it says here, I announced my separation from the United States, both in the military but in economics also. So please, if you have another problem of economics in the country, he says in Beijing, according to the Philippines GMA News, the agency quotes, he is adding, I have separated from them, so I'll be dependent on you for a long time, but I don't worry, we will also help. And this is the Prime Minister of the Philippines, and this guy's also I don't know too much about what he's up to, but apparently this was a big thing in the news for a little bit last 3 days, that this guy was recently separating from, I guess, aiding and economic wise separating from the United States. So these are all different kinds of factions and little flags that are going off in my mind, as different factions side with different more powerhouses such as China, which own almost 90% of the U.S. product surplus. I guess GDP is imported via China. A lot of it, just take a look at Walmart. Walmart has all Chinese goods in it most of the time, if not 99% of the time. So what happens when such a power horse can control the market? I mean, being a film producer, I knew that China was a deep pocket. It had its pockets deep in, or Hollywood had its pockets deep within Chinese money. So whenever you have different factions like this taking place, you start to see like, wait a minute, there's something ramping up here. What is going on? These are all red flags, signs of concern that are of interest. And so there's just so many different things going on right now, basically, and all of these different things we can see. We can't always predict the future. We can try to prepare, but I think in the end it boils down to, we've had, especially in America, all roads lead to Rome in many cases. We have been very lazy in a lot of our understanding. We haven't really disciplined ourselves. We let a lot of laziness get to us, and as you said, it wouldn't be a surprise that we get what we deserve in many cases. So I think that that's a lot of kind of where we see problems occurring. It's interesting. I'm keeping my eye on it, and I'm asking a lot of people about a lot of different things. Where do they see things going? Always asking for different opinions and views on it. So, yeah.
I mean, like I said, I find your point very interesting about what happened in the Philippines, and it's going to continually happen even more. And like I said, our currency is going to go to shit, just like in Venezuela. And it's one thing I find really funny. In many states right now, they're starting to eliminate taxes on tampons, and women want taxes. Women want tampons to be something that are available for free. Not even toilet paper is free, but they want tampons to be available for free. And I'm thinking to myself, they can't. They don't have toilet paper in Venezuela. And do you think they actually have tampons? Are you guys out of your fucking minds? So, I mean, you guys are crying about tampons. What are you going to do when you can't even wipe your ass?
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
It's quite ridiculous. It's quite hilarious. Like I said, I think that what we do have, one thing that guys like me and you have, and others watching right now, there's a guy in your chat called New World Order Soldier Pepe. Shout out to Pepe. And there's obviously people who know what's going on, like Zeta, who's also watching, and Zeta X, and people like us. We will at least stand a chance because we know that you can't just be a fucking sheep. We at least know what's happening. I mean, even if we're broke and we don't have the ability to prepare extremely, at least our minds we still have some autonomy. A lot of these people have no autonomy at all. They will literally fight. It's like they're fighting to die. They're fighting to go to the slaughter.
You know what it is? It is. I think it was Alex Jones that mentioned this, but he said liberalism is the worship of being destroyed. I mean, you just think about it. It is the worship of being destroyed. Every little bit of it. Like they just like, especially with the millennials, they believe in all this equality, feminism bullshit, without looking, at the sides through and through. But it is just a complete ridiculous thing, and it's kind of sad to see. But that's just what happens when you buy into that crap. And I wanted to mention a couple people in the comments that asked a question. Let's see here. Let's see. Unknown Mgtow says, "Hey guys, can you discuss what you might think might happen if Trump wins the election? I mean, from the perspective of women, since so many women will vote for her because she is a woman. I think Hillary Clinton, if she gets in, will be a poster child for feminist ideology, because it's all part of the social engineering that's taking place. And, she will definitely be one of the dark horses involved in this whole thing. And, she will absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised, having a giant say in pushing that forward. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned this, but what will happen, I think, with this election is, regardless of who gets in, we're going to see some kind of craziness go down, because the country has been so divided by who is right and who is wrong, that there's like TNT powder laying, gunpowder laying everywhere. And the minute that one person lights a match, the whole thing's going to go up, in terms of disagreement, of people disagreeing with the end result, disagreeing with the result of the election, because if the Donald Trump people get in, and I support Donald Trump, I think he's trying to do the best he can by exposing which he has, but I'm not ignorant. I know that the people that get into power are chosen to get into power. So if they get in, or if Hillary Clinton's people get in, then, people that support Donald Trump are going to get really upset because of the results, because they know it's rigged at that point. And if Hillary Clinton's people don't get in and Donald Trump people do get in, then Hillary Clinton's people are going to try to throw some kind of crazy shit and cause civil unrest, So it's hard to tell. I would say just prepare for both case scenario, batten down the hatches, get yourself ready. But Unknown Mgtow, that's all I can say about it. I really don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that politics and all these things in general are nothing more than just fabricated distractions, and I don't buy into politics. I don't think we should. I think politics need to go. I think government needs to go. I think all this enforcement needs to go. Everything needs to be wiped clean of the slate, and everything just needs to be done over again, and we need to rule ourselves and not let some other faction rule it for us. And I think if we can do that, we might be a little better off in a perfect world. So what do you think about that, Angry Mgtow?
Well, one thing I'm going to say is, you mentioned, well, if Donald Trump gets in, that's what that means he was chosen. And I think that's an important point. The thing is that people have pointed out that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have been excellent friends for many years. There are pictures with Clinton and Trump, Bill Clinton and Trump playing golf. These people are friends. And you have to wonder, could you imagine, okay, there are a lot of people who say that Alex Jones is a part of the problem. He's a part of the elites, and the elites have basically put him there. Because, for example, think about it: if you have too many people who are the side of the liberals, then people may start to become aware. So what do? They play both angles. How crazy is it to control both sides of the narrative? And that very well could be what the elites are doing. So imagine if the elites literally just have Donald Trump out there right now for that purpose. In other words, his intention was never to win the election. His intention was always to be the anti-liberal campaign. But in reality, he knows he'll never win. He's simply playing his part so that people actually believe that they actually have a chance. Because if people don't have if people actually thought Hillary was unanimously going to become president, and they had no chance of seeing any, they had no chance of choice, then it could create a scenario where people might actually begin to wake up and say, we can't allow this to happen. But now that they have, this back and forth rhetoric, it makes people believe that they actually have a choice in what happens in society when it's been decided all along. In reality, Hillary Clinton had the nomination long ago. I mean, she was chosen as president long ago, and and uh, and Donald Trump is just making everyone think that they actually have a chance at changing things when in reality they absolutely don't. I think Donald very well may not end up becoming president. I don't think that if he did, he would do anything different. He's a part of the elites. He's a part of the problem. I think. I've never believed that Donald Trump would do anything different. I think that he's one of those that's just going to rape the country and go his way, just like Hillary. They're all the same. All politicians are the same. I heard a good saying once that it doesn't matter who wins, we all lose in the end.
Well, I think it's a good thing to bring up with this whole notion of politics. You have to understand that politics is so inherently corrupt. It is so corrupt. It baffles me how corrupt it all really is. And to say that, because here's the deal, and I'm going to probably piss off a lot of people, but I look at every side of this, regardless if people like it or not. If Donald Trump is for real, then they would not let somebody, a candidate, because if Kennedy was apparently for real, and that's why they assassinated him. So if Donald Trump really is for real, then they'll probably try to assassinate him, because they're not going to let somebody who truly is against their, their whole agenda to come into play, because it's common sense, people. If they let somebody like that in, then he's of course going to wreck the plan. So why on earth would they let somebody like that in the front door to begin with? They're not going to. We saw that with Kennedy. And
I was going to say, Donald Trump recently said that the Federal Reserve has created a fake economy. And Hillary Clinton came out saying, this happened back in September, saying Donald Trump has eliminated himself as president. He has proven he is not capable of being president, because it doesn't matter if you're a presidential candidate or president, you never speak about the Feds. No president speaks about the Federal Reserve. That's a hands off, because if you say something, it can affect the markets. The Federal Reserve is untouchable. You don't discuss them. How stupid does that actually sound to you? You don't question the Federal Reserve? There you go.
Yeah. I think, it's just really hard to tell at this point. We'll just have to wait 2 weeks to see what happens. It's just, I think it has just been built up to such a degree that everybody's sick of it. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I've had enough of it. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And, it's just, I've had enough. I'm tired of it. I have election fatigue, and we're just going to have to see what happens. We really don't know at this point. And I think a lot of people have tried to figure it out. I think we all have independently come to our own conclusions about, where this world's headed, where we see people headed, the powers that be, the powers that rule things, and how they operate. They do not move without being, they just don't lie. And I have great respect for the enemy, because they don't fuck around, and everything that they've done has been pretty spot on. Now, I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong in the fact that, they actually don't get where they need to be, because that means nothing good for anybody in the end. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. I think we've all tried to figure this out. Some of us have come to our own conclusions, and some of us are trying to figure out what's going to happen. We just have to wait and see, and regardless of what the results will be, it never hurts to prepare yourself for what might happen. And we already see issues going on. And I can only tell people this so much before I already, give myself a headache, and go over this crap 1,000 times with people that don't care or don't really see what I'm talking about, but, yeah, we're just going to have to wait and see. It's 2 weeks away, so it's coming up quick, and whatever happens, happens. But I hold my breath. I'm holding my breath. I don't have any kind of commitment at the moment put on anybody, because I know how these politicians are. I know how corrupt they are. I know what they've done. I know what they're capable of doing. I have respect for the enemy in that sense. And so We're just going to have to wait and see. But on a final note, Angry Mgtow, I wanted to talk about one last thing with you, and also if there's anything else that you want to bring up, feel free to. The last thing I want to bring up is, where do you see Mgtow headed, and where do you see smaller groups regarding men's rights and talking about men's issues? Where do you see this going? I think Mgtow is still a very small group of people. But I think that things in this country and a lot of infiltration and the internet and what that whole notion brings, there's just been so much infiltration. And I talked about this with Traversable on his podcast, where, I think more than one occasion, both people in the Hangout said that we think that Mgtow is dying because there's just been too much people that are using the label for their own benefit. They're using it for personal gain, and I guess, people that take opportunity will take opportunity. So where do you see that headed on a final note? And if there's anything else you'd like to bring up, feel free to.
I think that's a great question. And despite all the bad apples, for example, I was pissed off last year when I saw Feminism LOL, Diana Davis, and I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah, I know who she is.
I was pissed off when I saw Feminism LOL tagging her videos as Mgtow, and we had a fight over that quite a few times. The thing is, though, I came to realize that, again, Mgtow is a philosophy. The time I spent apart or away from Mgtow, it helped me to understand that. And, Sandman, he made a video a while ago, maybe a year ago, I don't remember how long ago, explaining that he is a lone wolf. And because he is a lone wolf, he does not allow himself to become completely trapped by the so-called rules of the Mgtow collective. And that's how I operate right now. I live in the same terms. I don't tell people what to do. I tell people what my ideas are and ask them for their opinions. And I would rather people to be leaders of themselves than to become followers of mine, because we're stronger when we're all leaders, not followers. This way, if one person collapses, we don't all collapse with him. And with Mgtow, I don't see Mgtow dying, honestly. And the thing, so I was reading an article recently, and they pointed out something interesting about Mgtow. It wasn't actually an anti-Mgtow article, but it pointed out just how difficult it is to destroy Mgtow, because we're all individuals, and because even though there's a collective and there's still so many men that don't know they're Mgtows, or don't use the label. For that reason, we're like grains of. We're literally like grains. And because we don't stick together, all of us don't stick together. They can't get all of us. They can't catch all of us. They can say that, hey, Element X, you're a misogynist, right? But guess what? If I'm going my own way, you're going your own way, but we're not holding our hands as MRAs, so they can't get both of us.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
And I see Mgtow erupting. I see it, assuming that everything doesn't completely collapse, even as if it's a slow burn. I see Mgtow becoming more and more larger, and I literally see us within the next few years potentially, I don't want to say getting to the same size as feminism or popularity as feminism, but I do see it becoming a catastrophic force that people will begin to literally fear, and women will literally begin to fear it, as because there's no other term. Mgtow is literally capitalized upon the concept of going your own way. Neo-masculinity is going to die. The masculinity is attacked on all levels these days. Rujvi created this whole idea of neo-masculinity, and it's essentially just red pill bullshit. In other words, you're still going to go after a woman. Mgtow have taken the red pill, but the thing is, we take it a step further. We say, you know what? We don't want to marry these women. We don't want to take care of these women. We don't want to give these women our resources.
Neo-masculinity, on the other hand, it's still a form of traditionalism. It's just a rebranding of traditionalism made for today. It's bullshit. And I see more and more men literally, going the way of Mgtow. I'm noticing even white knights and simps that defend women, many of them are not getting married or even interacting with women. I mean, they're so feminized, but many of them are still afraid to interact with their slave masters. They're afraid to interact with them because they talk all this bullshit, but they won't. They talk the talk, but they won't walk the walk because they know what's waiting for them, and it's going to continue to happen like that on a massive scale. And more men are going to begin dropping out of society at a rapid rate. It's not showing as much right now because of the older generation that went to college, but a lot of the younger generation, a lot of younger men are never going to go to college. A lot of younger men are now going to start setting the trend in the next few years. The last of the millennials are coming of age in their 20s, and Generation Z is coming along now. And they're entering they're coming around 19, and they're around 18 and 19 now, and they're going to college, and they're really going, that's when the trend is really going to show up, like, hey, these guys are not interested in starting relationships. They're not interested in going to college. They're not interested in doing anything. They're not moving out of mom's basement. What's going to become of these guys? And it's going to become a social issue because women don't become engineers. They're not good engineers at the very least. And they're not going to replenish these jobs. And with the loss of men in the United States, the loss of that labor, as more men go Mgtow, it's going to create a catastrophe. And like I said, those men are going to be looking for guidance, and they're going to come to Mgtow. They're not going to go to Rouge. They're going to come to Mgtow. There's a lot of guys who are going to say, we're tired of we're tired of the political bullshit. We're tired of all the fighting. We don't want any more of it. We want freedom from it. We don't want the government. We don't want to have anything to do with any of this. And that's where the Mgtow are going to say, come on in. You don't have to be a part of any of this. You can go your own way, focus on yourself, get the government out, forget about all that bullshit. And a lot of men are going to turn to Mgtow. We're going to explode into the tens of millions, definitely within the hundreds of millions around the world. Definitely within the hundreds of millions around the world. But in the United States alone, we are going to erupt into the tens of millions within the next few years if it's a slow burn. And it is going to ravage women. It's going to ravage women. It's going to shape things in a way that society and modern society has never seen. What do you think is going to happen in terms of Mgtow?
Well, I think that I think it's a natural progression. If the environment around you is sick, and you have all these toxic ideologies of feminism and equality and all this stuff that doesn't make any sense and isn't logical, of course it's not going to be sustainable. It's common sense to say that that's not sustainable. And if it keeps going that way, then of course things are not going to keep going the best way they can. And, it's just a natural progression into something really bad happening. But on a final note, I wanted to add that I think Mgtow is definitely the outlet for people that are, especially men, that are fed up with all this fake society and all this stuff that they see. It's all very fake, and we see that it's fake, and it doesn't benefit any of us. Because you're just keeping up with the facade. And like I said, all these social constructs are made in, most of them are made in corporate, boardrooms and studios and all this, different places. And they put this out in society to manipulate the society in many different ways. And so, of course, when things like that are artificially created and fake, and you're not bringing up real issues and real things that matter, of course you're going to have problems that happen later on down the line, because it's just not natural. But regardless, I think on a final note with what happens, buckle your seatbelt, because it's going to be a crazy ride. I mean, that's all I can tell everybody. We don't know what's going to happen with the election. We don't know what's going to happen with politics, the future. We just don't know. A lot of us have a good idea of where we see things going. But nonetheless, it's going to be a bumpy ride. We really don't know what's going to happen. So 2 weeks out, the election's going to be coming up, and we'll see what happens there. And cross your fingers that everything doesn't go too much crazy, and that we can still just try to make it by. But at this point, I can't comment any more further on where I see any of that going. And so, but that, yeah, pretty much that's all I have to say about the election. We'll just have to wait and see. And regarding collapsing and civilization, I think it's going to be a slow burn type of deal if things keep going the way they're going. Again, it's hard to tell. So it's hard to predict these things. There's just so much different factors going on, and so we'll just have to wait and see. But on a final note, Angry Mgtow, is there anything else you would want to say before we end this chat?
The only thing I want to remind everyone is that all roads lead to Mgtow or death.
Absolutely. I mean, we see it every day, and we start to see it more and more, especially being Mgtow, that we are, there's not too many roads left. And I think that on a final note to add to that, I love being a part of this Mgtow community. I think a lot of guys have tried to come to the conclusion and try to work things out, and we're all kind of in the same boat here. And we're all just trying to make it by. And I think we're all going to be much better off being Mgtow, because we're just in reality. We're in reality. We're not participating in the matrix. We're not buying into fake, artificially created constructs just to go along with fake, artificial social norms that make no sense. It's just not worth it. I think we're moving into a different kind of understanding. People are growing, civilization is growing, human beings are growing, and we just have to go along with that natural progression. I think in the end, everything happens for a reason, and we just got to go with the flow and see what happens. But I don't think it's something we should be fearful of. We should just go with it and let things happen naturally. This kind of thing has happened before in society. I guess the old saying goes, history repeats itself. It's not like we're undertaking some kind of massive ordeal here. It's a first time for everybody, and we just need to let nature take its course, I think, on this one. And anyways, well, that's pretty much all I had to say, and I want to go ahead and wrap it up. I also want to thank Angry Mgtow for joining, and I also want to thank all the subscribers and all the viewers that joined in and that commented. Wanted to check the comments one last time here, see if anybody had any questions. Let's see here. Zeta X says, watch for them to do away with father and mother after the election. Yeah, that's always a possibility. It is always a possibility that, this whole thing could be basically a battering ram, and just, the worst of the worst comes to play here. Let's see what else. Somebody asked you a question, or Angry Mgtow from, I think it was from Unknown Mgtow. It says, hey, Angry Mgtow, look up Smegglypuff if you haven't seen it yet. Yeah, I think we all know about, or was it Jigglypuff? Can't remember who that was. Jigglypuff. Or that's a cartoon or something. I don't know. I can't remember who it was. Yeah, alrighty. Well, I just want to say thank everybody for coming on. Thanks for joining. Hope everybody has a good week. And I hope everybody will definitely join in for the second time, come around and have another Google Hangout sometime in the future. So thanks, Angry Mgtow, for coming on. I appreciate you for joining in.
All right, my pleasure.
All righty. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and everybody. Hope everybody has a good one.